Article 1. The cultural significance of mythology in ancient civilizations. Mythology has played a central role in the development of ancient civilizations, serving as a foundation for religious beliefs, moral codes, and social structures. Myths, often transmitted orally before being recorded in written form, provided explanations for natural phenomena, the origins of humanity, and the operations of the universe. From the stories of the Olympian gods in Greece to the creation myths of Mesopotamia, mythology functioned as a tool through which societies understood their world and codified their values. In ancient Greece, mythology was intricately linked to daily life, politics, and identity. The pantheon of Greek gods and goddesses, such as Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, were not only subjects of worship, but also figures used to convey complex human emotions and societal ideals. The myths of heroes like Hercules and Odysseus served dual purposes. They entertained and also promoted virtues such as bravery, cunning, and perseverance. Temples dedicated to these deities stood at the center of civic life, and festivals like the Olympic Games were held in their honor, reinforcing a shared cultural identity. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, mythology was deeply entwined with the concept of kingship and the afterlife. The pharaoh was viewed not merely as a political leader, but as a divine intermediary between the gods and the people. Stories about deities like Osiris, Isis, and Horus were used to legitimize the pharaoh's rule and explain the cycles of nature, such as the flooding of the Nile. The myth of Osiris's death and resurrection, for example, symbolized themes of renewal and order, principles that were crucial to the Egyptian worldview. In Mesopotamian cultures, such as those of the Sumerians and Babylonians, mythology played a crucial role in shaping the legal and political systems. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known literary works, reflects not only the religious beliefs of the time, but also the existential concerns of humanity, mortality, friendship, and the quest for meaning. Deities such as Enlil and Ishtar were believed to influence human fate, and their stories were embedded in rituals and governance. Laws like those in the Code of Hammurabi were believed to have divine origins, reinforcing their authority. Mythology also served to enforce social norms and gender roles within ancient societies. For example, in Greek mythology, female figures like Hera and Aphrodite were often portrayed in ways that reflected the expectations of women in society, either as dutiful wives or embodiments of beauty and desire. At the same time, myths could subvert these roles, as seen in stories about Athena, a warrior goddess who operated outside traditional gender boundaries. Such narratives offered a way for societies to explore and sometimes challenge the roles assigned to individuals based on gender. Beyond religious and social functions, myths contributed significantly to the artistic and literary traditions of ancient civilizations. Mythological themes were depicted in sculpture, pottery, and painting, and they served as inspiration for early forms of drama and poetry. In ancient Greece, playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides drew heavily on mythological material to explore moral dilemmas and human psychology. These works, though grounded in myth, also offered critical reflections on contemporary social and political issues. The transmission and adaptation of myths across cultures further underscore their significance. As empires expanded and civilizations came into contact, myths were often borrowed and modified. For instance, many elements of Roman mythology were directly adopted from Greek sources, though the Romans assigned different names and sometimes altered characteristics to suit their own societal values. Similarly, mythological elements from the Near East influenced both Greek and Hebrew traditions, illustrating the fluidity and interconnectedness of ancient belief systems. In sum, mythology in ancient civilizations was far more than a collection of fanciful tales. It was a dynamic and integral part of cultural life. Through myths, societies explained the unexplainable, legitimized authority, expressed their values, and articulated their hopes and fears. These narratives provided a framework through which ancient peoples made sense of their world and transmitted their cultural heritage to future generations. As such, mythology remains a vital lens through which modern scholars can interpret the complexities of ancient civilizations. Article 2. The development and impact of agricultural terracing in ancient societies. Agricultural terracing, the practice of shaping land into stepped levels for farming on slopes, has been a critical innovation in the history of human agriculture. Developed independently by multiple civilizations across the globe, terracing allowed societies to cultivate hilly and mountainous regions that would otherwise be unsuitable for sustained farming. The method not only prevented soil erosion and improved water retention, but also supported the growth of stable and complex societies in challenging environments. One of the earliest known examples of terracing comes from the ancient highland regions of Peru, where the Inca Empire engineered extensive terrace systems to support their agricultural economy. The Andean landscape, dominated by steep slopes and varying altitudes, required innovative farming solutions. Inca terraces, or andines, were constructed with stone retaining walls and filled with layers of soil, sand, and gravel to facilitate drainage and maintain fertility. These terraces enabled the Incas to grow a variety of crops, such as potatoes, maize, and quinoa, at different altitudes, taking advantage of microclimates across elevations. Similarly, in Southeast Asia, the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras exemplify a sustainable form of land use that dates back more than 2,000 years. These terraces were not only feats of engineering, but also of social organization, requiring coordinated labor and long-term maintenance. The Ifugao people, who built and maintained the terraces, integrated their agricultural practices with cultural rituals and traditional ecological knowledge, ensuring their preservation through generations. The design of these terraces maximized water efficiency and demonstrated an intimate understanding of the landscape's hydrology. In East Africa, the ancient terracing systems in the Ethiopian highlands reflect another adaptation to environmental challenges. These structures, often built on steep escarpments, reduce the risk of landslides and soil depletion. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence indicates that these terraces supported intensive agriculture and population growth. Like their Andean and Southeast Asian counterparts, Ethiopian terraces were part of a broader system of land management that included crop rotation, agroforestry, and community-based maintenance. Terracing was also practiced in the Mediterranean region, particularly among the ancient Greeks and Romans. In these arid and semi-arid climates, conserving water was essential. Terraced fields helped capture rainfall and limit runoff, allowing for the cultivation of olives, grapes, and cereals on otherwise marginal lands. Roman agricultural manuals describe the importance of slope management and soil conservation, emphasizing that terracing was not merely a structural technique, but a key part of sustainable land stewardship. Despite regional differences, all these terrace systems share certain unifying features. They required significant upfront investment in labor and materials, often only possible through centralized planning or communal cooperation. Once established, however, terracing increased the long-term productivity of land, reduced vulnerability to droughts and floods, and made permanent settlement feasible in otherwise marginal environments. These outcomes had profound demographic and political consequences, enabling the rise of complex societies supported by reliable food supplies. The legacy of ancient terracing continues to influence modern agricultural practices. In many parts of the world, traditional terraces are still in use, often maintained using indigenous knowledge passed down through generations. In addition, contemporary sustainable agriculture programs have begun to reassess terracing as a model for climate resilience, especially in areas facing land degradation and water scarcity. Restoration projects in countries such as China, Kenya, and Peru have shown how rehabilitating ancient terraces can improve food security and ecological health. However, terracing is not without its challenges. Abandonment of traditional terraces due to urbanization, migration, or shifts in agricultural policy can lead to rapid landscape degradation. Without regular maintenance, terraces are prone to collapse, leading to soil erosion and reduced productivity. Moreover, the labor-intensive nature of their construction and upkeep makes terracing less attractive in modern economies that prioritize mechanization and efficiency. Addressing these issues requires a balanced approach that combines traditional knowledge with modern technology and policy support. In conclusion, agricultural terracing represents one of the most significant and enduring human responses to environmental limitations. Its widespread adoption across diverse geographies and cultures underscores its utility and adaptability. While often overlooked in discussions of ancient technological innovation, terracing played a foundational role in shaping landscapes, supporting civilizations, and fostering sustainable agriculture. As contemporary societies face escalating environmental pressures, the lessons embedded in these ancient systems may prove more relevant than ever. Article 3. The emergence of paper currency and its impact on global trade. The use of paper currency represents a significant shift in the evolution of economic systems, marking a departure from commodity-based trade to a more abstract, symbolic representation of value. Prior to the widespread adoption of paper money, economies relied on barter systems or metallic coinage, which were often cumbersome and limited in scalability. The emergence of paper currency enabled more efficient trade, supported the growth of centralized states, and laid the foundation for modern financial institutions. One of the earliest known uses of paper money occurred during the Tang dynasty in China in the 7th century, though it was the Song dynasty, 961-279 CE, that institutionalized its use on a large scale. Faced with a shortage of copper for minting coins and the need to support expanding trade networks, Chinese merchants and officials developed promissory notes called jiaozi. These were initially private instruments issued by merchants, but were later standardized and regulated by the state. The government-backed notes helped facilitate commerce over long distances without the physical burden of transporting heavy metal currency. The success of paper currency in China did not immediately spread to other parts of the world. In Europe, the transition was much slower, with skepticism rooted in the belief that currency must be backed by tangible assets like gold or silver. However, by the 17th century, European banking institutions began experimenting with paper instruments, including banknotes and bills of exchange. Sweden is often credited with issuing the first official European banknotes in the 1660s through Stockholm's Banco. This development coincided with the rise of early capitalist economies and more sophisticated financial systems. The spread of paper money had profound implications for global trade. As maritime empires expanded and commercial networks stretched across continents, the portability and divisibility of paper currency became essential for managing complex financial transactions. Paper money reduced transaction costs, increased liquidity, and allowed for the creation of credit markets. This enabled merchants to operate on larger scales and promoted economic integration between distant regions. However, the increased reliance on abstract representations of value also introduced new risks, such as inflation and counterfeiting. The use of paper currency also enhanced the power of the state. Governments that issued and controlled paper money could influence economic activity by expanding or contracting the money supply. This capacity laid the groundwork for modern monetary policy. In many cases, however, the temptation to overissue currency led to economic instability. For example, during the 18th century, France's experimentation with paper money under John Law's monetary schemes led to rampant inflation and public distrust in government-issued notes. The relationship between paper money and public trust became a central issue in its adoption and long-term viability. Successful monetary systems required not only effective regulation, but also public confidence in the issuing authority. In countries where institutions were perceived as stable and trustworthy, paper currency gained rapid acceptance. In contrast, regions with weak governance or high levels of corruption often saw the collapse of paper-based systems. This dynamic underscored the interconnectedness of political legitimacy and economic infrastructure. The 20th century saw a major transformation with the end of the gold standard, a system in which paper currency was directly exchangeable for a fixed amount of gold. As nations moved toward fiat money, currency with no intrinsic value but backed by government decree, monetary policy became an even more central tool for managing economies. Central banks emerged as key institutions in maintaining economic stability, using interest rates and money supply controls to influence inflation, employment, and growth. Today, paper money is increasingly being replaced or supplemented by digital forms of currency, such as electronic banking and cryptocurrencies. This ongoing evolution raises new questions about the nature of money, security, and control. While the medium continues to change, the fundamental issues of trust, governance, and value that accompanied the rise of paper currency remain deeply relevant. Understanding the historical trajectory of paper money provides crucial insight into both the achievements and vulnerabilities of modern economic systems. Article 4. The Physics of Sound Understanding Acoustic Waves. Sound, a fundamental aspect of human experience, is a mechanical wave that propagates through a medium by particle vibration. Unlike electromagnetic waves, which can travel through a vacuum, sound requires a material medium, solid, liquid, or gas, for transmission. At its core, sound is a disturbance that transfers energy through a medium via compressions and rarefactions of particles. The study of sound, known as acoustics, intersects disciplines ranging from physics and engineering to biology and musicology. The generation of sound begins with a vibrating source. When an object such as a tuning fork vibrates, it pushes against adjacent air particles, compressing them. These compressed particles then push on their neighbors, transmitting the energy outward in all directions. This chain reaction continues, producing longitudinal waves that move parallel to the direction of energy transfer. The speed of sound depends heavily on the medium's properties. It travels faster in solids than in liquids, and faster in liquids than in gases, primarily due to differences in particle density and elasticity. The generation of sound begins with a vibrating source. When an object such as a tuning fork vibrates, it pushes against adjacent air particles, compressing them. These compressed particles then push on their neighbors, transmitting the energy outward in all directions. This chain reaction continues, producing longitudinal waves that move parallel to the direction of energy transfer. The speed of sound depends heavily on the medium's properties. It travels faster in solids than in liquids, and faster in liquids than in gases, primarily due to differences in particle density and elasticity. The human ear can detect frequencies ranging roughly from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz, with sensitivity peaking between 2,000 and 5,000 Hz, where much of human speech occurs. Frequencies below this range are called infrasound, while those above it are known as ultrasound. Infrasound is utilized by animals like elephants for long-distance communication, while ultrasound has been adapted for medical imaging, industrial testing, and cleaning technologies. Despite being inaudible, these frequency bands carry significant energy and can interact with materials in complex and useful ways. Reflection, refraction, diffraction, and absorption are four critical behaviors of sound waves. When sound encounters a barrier, part of it reflects, which allows for the phenomenon of echoes. Refraction occurs when sound passes through media with varying properties, causing it to bend. This is why sound can sometimes be heard more clearly over water at night. Diffraction allows sound to bend around obstacles, which is why we can hear someone talking even when they are not in direct line of sight. Absorption, on the other hand, refers to the loss of sound energy due to conversion into heat, especially in porous materials. Architectural acoustics applies the principles of sound behavior to design spaces with optimal auditory performance. This involves managing reflections to ensure clarity of speech or music, and minimizing unwanted echoes or reverberation. Concert halls, for instance, are engineered with strategically placed surfaces and materials to produce uniform sound distribution. Similarly, recording studios employ acoustic treatments to absorb specific frequencies, preventing interference and ensuring accurate sound capture. Noise pollution, unwanted or harmful sound, has become an increasing concern in urban environments. Prolonged exposure to high-decibel sound can result in hearing loss, stress, and cardiovascular problems. Environmental acoustics examines how to mitigate such impacts through soundproofing, noise barriers, and zoning laws. Interestingly, plants and wildlife are also affected. Studies have shown that chronic noise can alter animal communication patterns and reduce biodiversity in affected areas. Noise pollution, unwanted or harmful sound, has become an increasing concern in urban environments. Prolonged exposure to high-decibel sound can result in hearing loss, stress, and cardiovascular problems. Environmental acoustics examines how to mitigate such impacts through soundproofing, noise barriers, and zoning laws. Interestingly, plants and wildlife are also affected. Studies have shown that chronic noise can alter animal communication patterns and reduce biodiversity in affected areas. Research into acoustic metamaterials, a new class of engineered substances, promises to further expand the control of sound. These materials can bend, focus, or block sound in unconventional ways, even creating acoustic cloaks that render objects undetectable to sonar. Unlike conventional materials, their properties derive not from chemical composition but from their internal structure, which manipulates wave behavior. Potential applications range from stealth technology to next-generation medical devices. From its fundamental principles to cutting-edge applications, the science of sound exemplifies how deeply physics permeates daily life. Whether in the natural calls of animals, the structure of concert halls, or the algorithms behind a phone call, understanding acoustic waves enhances our ability to shape the sonic environment. As technology progresses, acoustics will likely remain a field of growing relevance, bridging sensory experience with scientific innovation.